the Equality Act is obviously 10 years out of date, just by the very nature of equality and the conversations we're having now in comparison to what we would have been talking about 10 years ago. Again, I would be more likely in my work to be talking to and lobbying Welsh Government in terms of equalities issues and the requirements that are put in place by Welsh Government rather than necessarily considering the Equality Act. But of course it does have massive implications in Wales. In terms of things that I would be lobbying for changes or updates in the Equality Act, one piece of work that we're very much involved in at the moment is a diverse 50-50 campaign in terms of equal representation in the Welsh Parliament as well as local governments. And one of the issues that we have is that, of course, the Equality Act allows for gender quotas but not other quotas, and there's not a strong suggestion that we can make in terms of other underrepresented groups, for example, an ethnicity quota or disability quota and things like that. So that's one area that definitely we would want to see strengthened. Again, I think the gender pay gap is under the Equality Act, and we would also want to see disability pay gaps and ethnicity pay gaps to get a much better picture of how different people are being disproportionately paid in that sense. And also, for example, a clear example of how in 10 years we've gone forward is that there's no recognition of non-binary people who are very much part of our society now. I think CEDAW is an important, it's obviously sort of called a Bill of Women's Rights. It's taking an international standard for women's rights, and also it is putting it on an international stage. So while the process around the CEDAW examination, for example, is a complicated one, and particularly complicated because of the nature of devolution within the UK. Again, we've found that in our work it is an important tool to use. So the UK government and therefore the devolved administrations have an obligation to uphold women's rights in the UK and within our individual nations. It's a good way of focusing our attentions on what progress has been made and what hasn't changed. As well, of course, it's not a treaty on its own. There are multiple other treaties that have been ratified by the UK government, which also intersect with women's rights. We have very much been calling for the incorporation of CEDAW into the incorporation of the principles of CEDAW into Welsh policy and law. So while there doesn't seem like there's a political will at the UK government's level to implement CEDAW, there is more of a leaning towards it at the Welsh level, and there is precedent for doing it as well. So the Welsh Government has incorporated the Convention on the Rights of the Child into Welsh policy and laws for devolved matters, which means that when they make a piece of legislation they have to consider it in line with the rights of the child. And so we've asked for them to consider something similar in terms of CEDAW, and I think something very similar is happening in Scotland, though I haven't followed that process exactly. One of the reasons that we and I think Welsh Government are particularly keen to do that is because of ideological differences perhaps between our two governments. So for example, The way the Welsh Government is looking at it is they're considering a human rights bill for Wales in light of the political feeling that the UK government may want to get rid of the human rights bill in the UK, so it will be a way of safeguarding those rights within Wales if the UK government does choose to do that. And one of the reasons that we've been calling for the incorporation while talking to our members of the Welsh Parliament, the things that we've highlighted as the benefits of the incorporation, that it raises the awareness of CEDAW and women's rights in Wales. It gives better protection to women, for example, that they could use CEDAW in domestic courts and tribunals if their rights were breached, something you can't do if it's just ratified. And it embeds women's rights long term, making them part of the national legal framework. So yeah, safeguarding against sort of possible sort of political wills changing hands.